Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
If reports out of Paris tonight are correct, then Britain will tomorrow sign a contract with EDF which it cannot afford to break. In order to keep the lights on, the UK will be committed to the highest electricity prices in its history. But ministers are so desperate to keep the electricity flowing that, for all the doubts about its technology, Hinkley Point must be built. Similar plants being built in Finland and France are years behind in completion and are billions of pounds over budget. The fallout of EDF's decision to accept the Hinkley contract has started already. One EDF board member quitting today, saying the project was too risky. Our business correspondent, Helia Ebrahimi, has the latest.
Things are not always as they seem. A first world nation with the lights teetering on blackout. Britain's energy crunch, the result of wasted years and acute policy failures. And here's what French power giant EDF thinks is the answer. A so-called state-of-the-art nuclear reactor in the heart of Somerset, designed to deliver 35 years of British power. The question is, will it rescue Britain's needs or condemn generations to overpriced energy?
And you have to strike the best deal you can at that point in time. You can always look back 20 years later and say, well, by 20 years' standards, this is expensive or not. The important thing that we need is capacity, and we need base load capacity. And nuclear at the moment has been for many years now the preferred government option for creating that capacity. Hinkley is the only game in town.
The Somerset project was dreamed up almost 10 years ago after Tony Blair called for private companies to fund a nuclear project. When EDF came on board, it said it would be ready for Britons to cook their Christmas turkeys with by next year. But that proved to be way off the mark. The years that followed were beset with delays, wrangling by the French for more subsidies, and even a nuclear catastrophe in Japan. By the time the Chinese were there, David Cameron was backed into a corner on the type of deal he could sign. Amazingly, though, the project has limped through, and tonight, as soon as the EDF board decision becomes final, the UK will be past the point of no return. At the moment, the wholesale price of energy is £46, but for Hinkley would have to pay £92.50. That's more than double, and it means over its lifetime, Hinkley's cost for the consumer has jumped from £6.1 billion to £37 billion, a six-fold increase, and the building work has not even begun.
It will be the most expensive power station in the world. It's difficult to say that it's going to be a good deal for the UK consumer. At the moment, it looks like a very expensive way of delivering what the government wants us to deliver, which is reliable electricity at zero carbon.
High-level radioactive waste.
It's pretty clear the Hinkley project has ignited controversy, whether with anti-nuclear protest groups, environmentalists or consumer watchdogs. What the government hopes is that the energy stability it brings, as well as the jobs, will outweigh the current doubts.
Helia Ebrahimi is with me now, and we're joined from Hinkley Point by our correspondent, Andy Davis. Andy, window dressing down there for today's announcement, or is something already going on?
Well, there's a little bit going on. I think you'll see more tomorrow morning. People here have been waiting a very long time for this moment, so a certain amount of relief among the few employees who are left here this evening, a relief that it appears to have been given the green light, but apprehension that they haven't yet got the final confirmation. What's likely to happen next? Well, that's Hinkley Point B over there, the existing power station. Hinkley Point A, that's the one that's being decommissioned, and by them, on this vast expanse of ground here, looks like they are now going to be starting to build Hinkley Point C. They've been levelling the ground here for some time now. But what they get now with this decision, if it comes through, is consent to actually start building. And what that means is that the workforce here, currently about 600 to 700, would at some point become 5,500. It would mean that instead of shifting earth around here, they would actually be bringing in 3 million tonnes of concrete just to lay the foundations. So that gives you an idea of just how big an operation this would be.
So what's the reaction there?
Well, there's a local Chamber of Commerce person here who said that this is actually really a pivotal moment, a deep economic stimulant for the local area. But of course, not everyone's happy. People in Bridgewater today, there were some people saying it's unsafe, they're using the wrong type of energy and it's overpriced. It's always been controversial, and that's not going to stop.
Thanks very much. Well, now, Helia, we had a resignation earlier in the year from the finance director of EDF. They've been struggling to come to a decision. Today, another board member resigned, but there does seem now to have been a decision. What's been going on?
Listen, it's extraordinary. I can't think of another project that's been beset with so many different issues. And you talked about the resignation. Of course, we had the finance director earlier this year resigning because of Hinkley and giving a very stinging testimony to the French government about why EDF couldn't afford it. And this is a company that has had huge problems. You know, it's been raided by French authorities. Its French partner, Areva, who designs nuclear plants and the components, has had to admit that for decades it falsified safety records. You know, and first and foremost, you've got to think the other two reactors that are like Hinkley haven't actually been delivered in Finland and in France. So real big questions.
And so, I mean, what actually is the British government doing? Why are they so desperate to sign this?
Look, we are very much at the end of the line with our energy ability. We don't have stable energy. Over the winter this year, we were really at rock bottom rates. For 10 years, the government has been struggling to decide what it's going to do in terms of, does it replace the coal power station? Does it bring renewables on board? And how does it push through the nuclear power stations? I think from people I've spoken to within government, there is a real, I guess, depression about the Hinkley project because nobody thinks it's that brilliant. But in a post-Brexit environment, I think there's a lot of nerves about coming out of that deal and ending it. This deal has a symbolic meaning because it means Britain is open for business.
Helia Ibrahimi. Well, now, with us in the studio, Kate Blagojevich from Greenpeace, and we're joined from Hinkley Point by the local MP, Conservative Ian Littlegranger. Ian Littlegranger, obviously, you're delighted because you've been very much with this project all along. But there are the most appalling problems besieging it. I mean, the fact that Finland and France trying to build the same thing are billions of pounds overspent and terribly behind.
Well, I think that's easy to say about Finland and France. Let's wait and see what HPC does, Hinkley Point C. This has been 9.5 years in the planning, and the union guys are here on site, the next door crew. We're ready to go. We'll show people what we can do. We spent a lot of time getting this right to the stage now that we feel, and France feels, they can go ahead with this. You watch us.
Well, surely you're anglicising something which is extremely French. I mean, 25,000 jobs, 5,000 go to you, 20,000 go to the French. If the French don't pull their weight, you're bust.
I know they'll pull their weight all right, I can promise you that. Vincent de Rivers and his entire team have made that clear. The unions have made that clear. We've made that clear. We'll show them what we're like, and we'll show them what we're about. I've got no doubts we're going to deliver. And behind me, you can see the site, £2.5 billion already spent. Workforce of nearly 1,000 on site. We're doing what we said we're doing.
Unstoppable momentum, Kate Blagojevich. It's going to happen.
I think time will tell. I mean, certainly in Finland, in France, and in fact in China too, all of the similar reactors that they're trying to build are not being built. They can't be built at the moment. They're in terrible trouble. The French nuclear regulator is not happy at all about the situation in Flamanville, where they're trying desperately to finish the build of the very similar reactor to what's coming to Hinkley. There isn't a scrap of evidence that shows that actually this reactor can be built. The fact that the government believes that it can be built in Somerset is wishful thinking and nothing more than that.
Well, Ian Littlegranger, let's get this scrap of evidence. What evidence is there that this plant can be built? There's never been one built yet, and there are these three that are in production. What convinces you so strongly that it can be built and will be built?
Well, I spent 9.5 years on this. I started under Tony Blair. The Secretary of State was Ed Miliband. We've gone through the due diligence. We've worked absolutely flat out, and it's taken that time to make sure everything that we can do to make sure this is a success is being done. And so far, everything they said they would do, they've done it. We're actually standing on the site at the moment. You can see behind me, they're not hanging around. We've actually made sure that we're up on speed, we're doing what we say we're doing, we're delivering. That's the evidence. I'm standing on it.
This is actually a brutal failure for Greenpeace, isn't it? Because the fact is, you've not managed to come up with an alternative for saving the British energy production scene. It's desperately short of energy, and surely there is nothing that could quickly be built that could produce the 7% that's going to be built down there in Hinkley Point.
No, I disagree. I think that the government can meet its decarbonisation targets in the UK. It just has to want to. And at the moment, it doesn't want to. It wants to go for new nuclear and it wants to go for gas. And that is why it's been slashing the subsidies for renewable power, so that investment has pulled out. We've seen this week that 12,000 jobs have been lost in the solar industry just in the last year because of the government's incoherent policies. And so investors have been pulling out. And we should be embracing the new technology, the innovation that is happening elsewhere in the world with both hands. And instead, this government is locking us in to an old-fashioned and broken technology that isn't working.
Ian Little-Granger, young as you are, you will have long gone when this thing is producing the most expensive electricity this country has ever produced. What are you going to say from your retirement seat to your constituents when they discover they are paying these massive sums for their electricity bills?
I'm going to be here in 10 years' time, I can promise you that, and you can take that as read. I've just been listening to the lady. I don't know which planet she's on. She's not a planet I recognise. I'll tell you this. We've made sure that we've got what we have to do to keep the lights on. That's what this is about, and we will keep the lights on. We're still doing gas. We're doing other technology just behind us. We're looking at a tidal lagoon. I'm sure she's happy about that, but this is all not going to be done in isolation. And I'm going to square off my constituents, because they've been part of this scheme. We've had nuclear here since 1958. Don't scare us. We know what we're doing with it. And I can assure you, they know what they're paying for, and they know why we're paying for it. But we want energy security. Yeah, we're in a new world.
With respect, I mean, the previous plant was not producing electricity at the vast price that is going to be charged for this electricity for 30 years. 30 years when every other energy source in this country is going down in price.
Well, this will be producing for 60 years. We get this back in 30 years, so we're buying it on a mortgage. You're quite right in that. And actually, if you aggregate it over that 60 years, and that's with today's technology, given the B station, which is the one on the far side over my left shoulder, that is already on a life extension. This plant will go on probably for 100 years with the technology in 60 years' time. That'll be a price worth paying.
Kate Blagovic, would you be able to produce this quantity of electricity cheaper than they are?
Well, we've already seen that Dong Energy this week has said that they're producing offshore wind power for the Netherlands at cheaper rates than Hinkley. This is a terrible deal for the British consumer and taxpayers who are going to be paying for this. School leavers today are going to be paying for this until they retire. This is an absolutely ridiculous situation to be in for a technology that is old-fashioned, broken, when we could be breaking new boundaries with new technologies that are working and are going down in price.
Kate Blagovic, Ian Little-Granger, thank you both very warmly for joining us.